Welcome to one of the most unsettling stories ever documented in Savannah, Georgia. The year was 1839, when Savannah was still seen as the pride of the South. Its streets were lined with oak trees covered in long Spanish moss, their shadows stretching across old cobblestone paths. The warm, heavy air carried whispers that drifted from the grand homes on Abercorn Street to the servant quarters hidden behind them. Everything began with a small notice printed in the Savannah Morning Republican on April 3, 1839, a brief announcement that most readers likely overlooked. A marriage license had been issued to widow Elizabeth Thornton, age 42, and James Bennett, age 26. What the paper did not say was that James Bennett had, until recently, been considered property, not a free man, on the Thornton plantation. The scandal that followed would pull apart the Thornton family and expose secrets long buried beneath Savannah's polite society. Elizabeth Thornton, born Elizabeth Montgomery, came from one of Georgia's oldest and richest families. Her grandfather had come to the colony in 1733 with General Oglethorpe himself. Over time, the Montgomery family grew wealthy through rice plantations along the Savannah River, wealth made from the labor of hundreds of enslaved people. Elizabeth grew up in comfort inside the family's impressive three-story home on Reynolds Square. Church records from Christ Church Episcopal show that she married at age 17 to Richard Thornton, a widower 28 years older, who owned a large cotton plantation outside the city. Their marriage united two powerful Georgia families. Richard's first wife had died giving birth, leaving behind a son, William, who was only 5 years younger than his new stepmother. According to the Journal of Mary Benny, a cousin who visited the plantation in 1826, the Thornton household was run with calm strictness. Mary wrote that Elizabeth appeared delicate but ruled the home firmly, keeping tight order among the servants. Richard rarely spoke at dinner, and when he did, an uncomfortable silence followed. Those who knew the family said Richard often traveled to Charleston or Augusta, leaving Elizabeth to manage the estate. Few people noticed how much time she spent with a house servant named Grace, listed in household documents. Grace had arrived in 1822 after being purchased from a trader in Charleston, and she brought her young son with her, a 9-year-old boy named James. By 1835, tax records from Chatham County listed 47 enslaved people on the Thornton plantation. Among them, James Bennett appeared as a house servant, one of only 4 with that title. Most others worked the fields, their names reduced to numbers in inventory logs. But James's name showed up often in household accounts, first as Grace's boy, then simply as James, and later as James Bennett. The addition of a surname was unusual and has confused historians for years. Dr. Ellen Hammond, who studied the Thornton papers in 1963 before they mysteriously disappeared from the Georgia Historical Society, wrote that James was taught to read and write, an extraordinary fact for someone enslaved. In her manuscript, Whispers from Reynolds Square, Hammond said that ledgers showed purchases of books, slates, and pencils specifically for J.B.'s instruction. When Richard Thornton died during the yellow fever outbreak of 1836, his will left everything to Elizabeth and gave his son William a large inheritance. One clause stood out: "The servant, James Bennett, shall remain in the employment of my wife, and shall not be sold or transferred under any circumstances." Years later, this clause became central in the legal battles that exploded after the scandal. Elizabeth completed exactly 1 year of mourning before appearing in public again. Neighbors noticed that the estate continued running smoothly even after Richard's death. During this time, people began noticing things that raised suspicion. Margaret Habersham, a neighbor, later told investigators she had seen Elizabeth and James walking through the garden like companions instead of mistress and servant. A former kitchen maid named Sarah Johnson said she once walked into the study without knocking and found them standing close together, James pulling his hand from Elizabeth's arm. "They jumped apart like they'd touched fire," she said. "Mrs. Thornton sent me out fast, and her face was red in a way I'd never seen." As seasons passed, winter to spring, spring to summer, the house grew quieter. Elizabeth stopped attending social gatherings. Her cousin Thomas Montgomery visited her in early 1838 and wrote that she seemed changed, distracted, strangely cheerful, and wearing simpler clothing. He wrote that James served them tea and that Elizabeth spoke to him with ease, something that unsettled him. He wrote, "She said she has never felt more alive. There was something in her eyes I did not know, something that looked like secret joy." Soon after, a series of urgent letters began between William Thornton and his uncle, Judge Henry Thornton. William wrote in December 1838 that he had heard troubling reports about his stepmother's behavior and planned an unannounced visit. Judge Henry warned him to be careful, saying there were already whispers and that the matter should be handled quietly before it became public shame. William arrived at the plantation on January 15, 1839, during heavy rain. The next morning, the sheriff was called after what reports described as a disturbance of serious nature. What truly happened was never fully written down. All that is known is that William left before sunrise and went straight to the sheriff. By noon, James Bennet had been arrested on charges later dismissed. Elizabeth was not arrested but was quietly asked by church leaders to stay away from services for a time. 6 weeks later, silence turned into shock. The Savannah Morning Republican printed another notice, the marriage of Elizabeth Thornton and James Bennet. Somehow, Elizabeth had obtained legal freedom papers for James and married him in a private ceremony by Reverend John Baker, a Methodist minister known for abolitionist beliefs. The ceremony took place not in a church but inside the Thornton home, witnessed only by Grace and a lawyer from Philadelphia named Samuel Cooper. Records show Cooper stayed 2 nights in Savannah and then traveled north, never returning. The reaction was immediate and harsh. The Savannah City Council held an emergency meeting on April 5, 1839, calling the marriage a moral threat to society. William Thornton filed a petition claiming Elizabeth was mentally unfit and tried to take control of the estate. Judge Henry stepped aside due to family connection, but wrote privately to the governor asking for help. The Montgomery family publicly disowned Elizabeth, printing notices in newspapers across Georgia and South Carolina. What happened afterward is known only through scattered clues, as many official records were destroyed, likely on purpose. A letter found in 1954 during renovations of a home on Broughton Street described what followed. Written by someone who called himself a witness to infamy, it said that 12 men rode to the Thornton plantation on April 10th carrying torches and demanding that Bennet come out. Instead, Elizabeth stepped onto the porch holding a shotgun. She said, "This is my home and my choice. Leave now or face what follows." The anger in the men cooled when they saw her expression. They withdrew but returned 2 days later with the sheriff. This time, the house was empty. Furniture was covered with sheets, as if packed carefully, not abandoned. In James's small study, nothing remained, not one paper, book, or note. Sarah Johnson later said Elizabeth had taught James to read and write in that room, and that they spent many nights talking there. "They cleared it out completely," she said. "Nothing left to show what had happened all those years. Their disappearance became known as the Great Savannah Mystery. Rewards were offered and rumors spread. Some claimed the couple fled north with abolitionist help. Others said they were lost at sea. Some whispered their ghosts still walked the old plantation. No proof ever appeared. The search was called the biggest missing persons case in Chatham County history. Ports were watched, roads checked, Nearby states alerted. William hired detectives from New York, but no confirmed sighting was ever made. Still, stories circulated. A worker at a Charleston train station said he saw a white woman and a well-dressed black man boarding a train heading north. A ship captain in Wilmington, Delaware, said he had carried a mixed-race couple to Boston in late April but could not be sure. Later that summer, a banker in Montreal said a woman who looked like Elizabeth tried to withdraw money using papers from a Philadelphia lawyer named Samuel Cooper. As the years passed with no answers, the scandal became a warning told quietly to young women of good families. The Thornton estate later fell into ruin. After finally gaining control of the property, William sold it and never returned. The fate of the 46 enslaved people left behind was unclear, though some records show that several were sold to a plantation in Alabama. Grace, James's mother, was not listed among those sold. The mystery might have faded if not for what workers found 5 years later. In 1844, during repairs on the old house, workers found something hidden under the floorboards of the small study. Wrapped in oilcloth was a leather journal. It was given to local officials, then taken by Judge Henry, who reportedly read it in one sitting before locking it away. 3 weeks later, he died suddenly from what doctors called apoplexy, a stroke caused by severe distress. The journal was never released. His widow later claimed she burned it, saying it was dangerous and corrupting. But before it was destroyed, the judge's young clerk, Thomas Wilberforce, secretly copied parts of it. He later moved to Boston, joined abolitionist groups, and shared the copied passages with a Harvard researcher in 1861. Notes from that researcher, discovered in 1958, revealed that the journal belonged to Elizabeth and contained entries going back to 1822, the year Grace and James arrived. The early entries showed Elizabeth's growing interest in the child. She wrote, "The boy shows great intelligence. I may pay him too much mind, but there is something in his eyes, a quickness, that I have never seen in any other child." She described showing him her pressed flower book and how he remembered every name after hearing it once. Later entries described her decision to teach him to read despite her husband's strict rule. She wrote, "R would be furious if he knew, but what harm is in learning? The boy takes in every word like sunlight." As the years passed, her writing became more emotional. In 1830, when James was 17, she wrote, "I find myself watching him in the mornings. I tell myself it is pride, nothing more, but I fear it is something deeper, something I dare not name." By 1835, just before Richard's death, she wrote, "Today we spoke of poetry. When he recited Byron, I no longer saw the child I once taught, but the man he has become. I closed the book and sent him away. Later I cried, though I cannot explain why." The most revealing passages came after Richard's death. She wrote, "With R gone, the house feels changed. Jay and I walked at dusk through the garden, talking of the fields. For the first time I asked what he thought, not from politeness, but because I truly wanted his opinion. Our hands touched as we looked at a broken camellia bloom. We did not speak of it, yet neither of us stepped back. Later, we stopped pretending. When the house was quiet and the doors locked, he would come to the library. We read and talked, and I felt understood in a way I never believed possible. He knew my heart more deeply than anyone ever had. I have begun asking about laws in other states. There must be a place where we can live without constant fear." The last copied entry was dated March 30th, 1839, only days before their marriage notice appeared in the paper. "Tomorrow, everything changes. Sam Cooper has secured the documents. Once the ceremony is finished, we must leave immediately. Jay worries for his mother, but she insists on remaining for now to keep up appearances until we are safe. I sewed what jewelry and money I could into our clothing. The northern friends Sam introduced me to have arranged safe houses along our route. I know the danger, but for the first time in my life, I am choosing my own direction." The Harvard researcher added a curious note. Wilberforce said that in 1852, while visiting Montreal, he met a woman he believed was Elizabeth Thornton. She lived under another name in a quiet area of mixed families. When he approached her, she denied being Elizabeth, yet invited him in for tea. During their conversation, she brought up poetry, especially Byron, which reminded him of the journal. Before leaving, he noticed a portrait on her wall of a black man dressed formally. When he asked about it, she said with a small smile, "My late husband." He had died 3 years earlier. Wilberforce never reported the meeting. Over time, the Thornton scandal faded from public memory, buried beneath the rising national tensions that would soon lead to war. The plantation changed owners twice before being mostly destroyed during Sherman's march to the sea in 1864. The land was later divided and built over. Today, a housing area stands where the old house once stood, and few who live there know what history lies beneath their feet. The Thornton name survives only in a small side street near Abercorn and in the Georgia Historical Society archives, where researchers sometimes stumble upon pieces of the story. In 1957, during construction of a shopping center near the old plantation site, workers uncovered a small metal box about 3 feet underground. Inside were a cameo brooch, a pressed camellia between glass, and a folded note tied with a lock of hair. The items were sent to the Georgia Historical Society, where they remained unrecorded until 1963. That year, Dr. Ellen Hammond examined them as part of her research into the Thornton mystery. She observed that the cameo matched one mentioned in Elizabeth Thornton's wedding records. The pressed flower was a rare camellia grown on the plantation, and the hair seemed to come from 2 different people intertwined. Dr. Hammond never published her conclusions. Colleagues said she grew fixated, convinced more evidence was hidden. In spring 1963, she traveled to Montreal to investigate the Wilberforce story. She wrote to her department chair claiming she had found something important and would return with proof that would change Georgia's history. 2 weeks later, her hotel room was found empty and her notes missing. The only thing left behind was a single pressed camellia placed on her pillow. 3 days later, she was found in a hospital, confused and unable to recall what happened or where her research went. After that, she abandoned the Thornton case and refused to discuss it until her death in 1968. Now, the story of Elizabeth Thornton and James Bennett sits somewhere between confirmed history and legend. Parts can be verified through court records, newspapers, and letters. Other parts remain uncertain, built from fragments, rumors, and quiet spaces in the record. What is certain is that in the spring of 1839, a wealthy white widow and a black man she once owned under Georgia law disappeared together. They left behind a shocked society, not only because they broke racial laws, but because their closeness had developed over years, possibly even while her husband was still alive in a home meant to symbolize Southern order. The true mystery is not only what became of them afterward, but what happened before. What took place in the silent hours of teaching and learning, in soft talks over books, in glances exchanged in rooms where others saw only mistress and servant. What words were whispered, what promises made, and most troubling to those who later examined the case, how many other homes hid similar stories behind calm and proper walls. How many other lives crossed forbidden lines that society fought hard to protect. After Dr. Hammond's death, a graduate student sorting her belongings found a sealed envelope with a note asking that it not be opened until 50 years after her passing. The university administration, worried about legal concerns, ignored her request and opened it with lawyers present. A staff member who witnessed it but wished to remain anonymous later said the envelope held 1 sheet of paper. On it was an address in Montreal and the message, "They survived, they lived, their descendants walk among us still." The paper was reportedly taken by university officials and never made public. The address, according to that witness, led to a cemetery. Even now, the story of Elizabeth Thornton and James Bennett resurfaces in academic debates, in specialized studies of antebellum Southern society, and in quiet stories told during ghost tours in Savannah's historic district. Guides often point to a certain house on Reynolds Square, not the original Thornton home, but one nearby, and claim that on some nights, especially in April, a faint light drifts from room to room as if someone is searching for something or someone. Some say they've heard a soft voice reciting poetry, though the words are never clear. These tales are naturally tourist embellishments with no real proof behind them. What remains certain is this. In 1839, Elizabeth Thornton and James Bennett chose one another in a world that outlawed such a choice. Instead of giving in to separation, they vanished. Somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten archive, an old attic trunk, or beneath a modern building, a clue may still exist about what happened after they slipped from written history into legend. Until new evidence appears, their story remains one of Savannah's most haunting and thought-provoking chapters. Not because of ghosts or violence, but because it challenged the very structure of the society around them. It showed how fragile those social rules were, and how far people would go either to protect or to break them. As one Harvard researcher studying Wilberforce's notes wrote, "The most unsettling part of the Thornton case is not what it reveals about the two people themselves, but what it hints about the countless others whose stories never reached paper, those whose bravery was unseen, whose voices were silenced, whose lives were erased from memory. How many Elizabeth Thorntons and James Bennetts lived and died across the American South, their struggles buried with them? What does it say about a society that worked so hard to ensure such stories never surfaced?" These questions still echo through Savannah's moss-covered squares, along the quiet riverbanks, and in the spaces between the lines of history. In 1972, during renovation of an old colonial post office building in Schenectady, New York, workers found a hidden compartment behind a loose basement brick. Inside was a small leather pouch containing 3 letters addressed to Mrs. Jane Bennett at an Albany address. The letters, dated 1841 to 1843, were written in a graceful hand and signed with the initial G. Historians later identified the writer as likely Grace, James Bennett's mother, long thought to have died on the Thornton plantation in 1840. The letters did not directly mention Savannah or the scandal, but they described a shared acquaintance who had moved north and wanted news from home. The most striking line appeared in the 3rd letter, dated December 18th, 1843. "Our mutual friend asks about you often. Life here has grown harsher since your departure. The new master is cruel. Many have been sold away. I still guard the secret you trusted me with, though some continue to question me. The item you left in my care remains safe where we agreed. When my time ends, I hope to join you in a place where people may live by their hearts rather than by the orders of others." These letters mattered not only for what they said, but because they existed at all. They suggested that Grace may have escaped north, contradicting official claims she died in Georgia. More importantly, they hinted at an ongoing network, a quiet line of communication that connected Georgia and New York, despite attempts to erase all ties between Elizabeth, James, and their past. More traces of this network appeared in 1959, when a historian studying the Underground Railroad found account books belonging to Samuel Cooper, the Philadelphia lawyer who witnessed Elizabeth and James's wedding. These books, discovered in a Quaker meeting house archive, contained coded entries later understood as financial records supporting escape routes. One entry, dated June 5, 1839, said, "Special arrangement for TNB package delivered safely to Montreal. Additional funds released for 5 years of protection and silence." Dr. Marcus Williams, who examined these ledgers before they were restricted in 1962, wrote privately, "The Cooper accounts show that the Thornton-Bennett escape was not a sudden act but a carefully planned operation that likely took years. The amount of money, enough for 5 years of safety and secrecy, indicates not only resources but extraordinary planning. One must wonder when Elizabeth first began preparing her escape from Savannah society. Was it after her husband's death or long before?" This question deepened in 1964 when workers demolishing an old rice mill near the original Thornton estate found a hidden space beneath the floorboards. Inside was a wooden chest holding what looked like teaching materials, a primer, a slate, pencils, and a copy of Byron's poems. Experts dated them to the 1820s or early 1830s, before Richard Thornton's death. Most intriguing was a small notebook filled with handwriting practice, the same sentence repeated in improving penmanship. "I am James Bennett. I am a man. I have a mind." At the bottom of the page, in different handwriting believed to be Elizabeth's, were the words, "Excellent progress. You have earned your name today." The find suggested that Elizabeth had been secretly teaching James while her husband was still alive. The rice mill, according to records, saw little use after 1825, when newer machines were built. That made it an ideal place for secret lessons, far from the main house, but not so distant as to raise suspicion. What no one has determined is when their relationship shifted from teacher and student into something deeper. No document confirms this before Richard Thornton's death. Yet, a letter Elizabeth wrote to her cousin Anne Montgomery on October 18, 1834, 2 years before she became a widow, includes a cryptic line that many believe hints at the change. "I live 2 lives now. One the world sees, where I play the part expected of me, and another built from moments stolen from the day, conversations that must never be heard, thoughts I dare not speak. It is in that hidden life that I feel most truly alive. Is it not strange to feel most real when one must hide the most?" The double life she described became harder to maintain after her husband's death. As a widow, she faced greater scrutiny, especially regarding the estate and those she now owned. Several accounts noted shifts in her behavior. Margaret Williams, a neighbor who kept a private diary found in 1957, wrote in September 1836, "Visited Elizabeth Thornton 6 months after her husband's passing. She seems different in a way I cannot explain. There is a restless energy about her that does not fit her mourning clothes. When I mentioned how difficult it must be to run such a large estate alone, she smiled strangely and said, 'I am not as alone as you may think.' I left feeling uneasy, as if I had glimpsed something not meant for me." As more people noticed Elizabeth's unusual behavior, James Bennett's role also changed. Witnesses later stated that by early 1838, James had taken on duties far beyond what was typical for someone in his position. The kitchen maid, Sarah Johnson, told investigators that he handled plantation accounts, met visitors when Elizabeth was unavailable, and even wrote to merchants on behalf of the estate. "He sat at the master's desk," she said, "used the master's pen, spoke with the master's tone, and Mrs. Elizabeth, she only smiled like she knew exactly what she was doing. It all seemed natural." This slow shift in roles, this soft weakening of the strict lines that structured Southern society, could not continue forever without consequences. The turning point, as already noted, came with William Thornton's unexpected visit in January 1839. What he actually witnessed is still uncertain, but in a letter he sent to Judge Henry Thornton right after rushing away from the estate, he described it as a break in the natural order, so unsettling that he could not stay in that house another hour without fearing he might lose control of himself. He said he found Elizabeth and James in a situation that left no space for an innocent explanation, though he avoided giving clear details out of respect for the family's reputation. What happened right after William's discovery began a series of events that would eventually lead to Elizabeth and James's marriage and later disappearance. What far fewer people know is that during the 3 months between that visit and their wedding, Elizabeth quietly began selling her belongings and shifting her wealth. Records at the Bank of Savannah show that from January 20th to March 15th, 1839, she withdrew large sums of money and turned them into portable forms, such as banknotes and letters of credit. She also sold several pieces of jewelry through a broker in Charleston, proven by a receipt discovered among Samuel Cooper's papers. The most striking detail is that she transferred ownership of a small property she had inherited in Philadelphia to a company with Cooper listed as the only trustee. These actions make it clear that Elizabeth was preparing not only to flee, but to begin an entirely fresh life beyond Georgia. The careful legal steps taken through other people and across different states show she fully understood the challenges ahead. She and James needed not only to escape, but to create new identities in a place where their past could not follow them, where they could live freely without fear of being discovered or cast out. The strongest proof of these preparations appears in a statement from 1841 by a former clerk at a Savannah print shop. During a court dispute over William Thornton's claim to his stepmother's estate, the clerk said that in February 1839, a well-dressed black man, later confirmed as James Bennett, ordered business cards and stationery for a Mr. James Bennett, importer of fine teas and spices, with an address in Montreal. Bennett told the clerk he was handling the work for his employer, who was expanding business in the north. The clerk did not think much of it then, but later understood what it meant once the scandal became known. Those business cards were not just a disguise. They showed the life Elizabeth and James had imagined together, one where he would not be a servant but a businessman, not property, but a respected man of trade. The choice of Montreal was intelligent. As part of British Canada, it stood far beyond American laws about runaway slaves. Its mixed population offered a type of safety, and its role as a major trading city made a tea and spice business sound completely believable. The details of their route from Savannah to Montreal remain mostly unknown, though scattered clues suggest they traveled by ship to Philadelphia, where Cooper sheltered them briefly and arranged new identity papers. From there, they moved north through New York and crossed into Canada. Among Cooper's belongings, there was a receipt for passage on the schooner Mary Jane from Savannah to Philadelphia, dated April 12, 1839. It listed 2 travelers, Mrs. E. Smith and Mr. J. Smith, described as aunt and nephew on family business. What appears certain is that by August of that year, someone matching Elizabeth's description attempted to access funds in Montreal. Later that same year, city directories recorded a James Bennett, importer, with a small shop on Rue St. Paul and a home on Rue Antoine. The following year listed a Mrs. Jane Bennett at the same address. No mention was made of their background or origins. Life in Montreal would have brought different challenges. Though they had escaped the threat of Southern law, they still had to build believable stories about their past. Elizabeth's accent, their appearance, and their mannerisms would all have to match the identities they created. Their business's success would rely not only on skill, but also on how well they could appear to be the people they claimed to be. From what remains, it seems they managed well. Records from the Port of Montreal show Bennett's tea and spice business had steady activity throughout the 1840s. Tax documents show slow but consistent growth, and by 1845, they had moved to a larger shop. Church records from a small Methodist congregation mention regular attendance and donations from Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, described as a couple of mixed background, vague enough to avoid questions. The most personal glimpse of their life in Montreal comes from the diary of a young woman named Marie Leblanc, who worked in their shop from 1843 to 1845. Found in 1966, her journal includes notes about her employers. Madame Bennet speaks French with an American accent, she wrote, but tries very hard to improve. She is always graceful, even in simple clothing, and treats everyone with kindness, from wealthy customers to poor vendors. She also wrote that Mr. Bennet managed the shop carefully and that the couple seemed quietly devoted to each other. They share looks when they think no one sees them, she wrote, small signs of understanding that make me hope for the same one day. In another entry, Marie wrote about a customer from Boston who asked Mr. Bennet about his past. He said he had grown up in the South but preferred the air of Canada, both in climate and in society. The man then asked if Madame Bennet was of European descent. A silence filled the shop. Mr. Bennet smiled and said, "My wife and I have found Montreal asks fewer questions, which is exactly why we chose it." The man soon left, but Madame Bennet's hands trembled as she arranged the tea canisters, though she pretended nothing had happened. This moment showed how delicate their safety truly was. Even in their new home, a single curious visitor from the South could have exposed them. This constant risk likely pushed them to sell their business in 1849 and move to a quieter town outside Montreal. Their old shop was purchased by a French-Canadian trader, and their home address soon disappeared from city records. From that point on, the trail becomes thin. No solid proof survives of James Bennet's reported death from pneumonia around 1849, as told by Thomas Wilberforce after meeting Elizabeth, though death records from that time are unreliable, especially outside large cities. What is confirmed is that in 1852, the same year Wilberforce said he met Elizabeth, a Mrs. Jane Bennet, widow, purchased a small house in St. Henry, then a separate town west of Montreal. The property remained in her name until 1867, when it passed to a Miss Grace Bennet, listed as her niece and only heir. Grace's appearance raises questions. There is no record of Elizabeth and James having or adopting a child, but the name Grace matches that of James's mother. Could she have been James's mother who found her way north, or a daughter born to the couple and named after her grandmother? The second seems more likely, supported by a church record noting the confirmation in 1860 of a Grace Bennet, age 14, which places her birth around 1846, 7 years after the escape from Savannah. If true, this means their story was not only about a forbidden union, but also about a family created across the deep lines of race and class that shaped 19th century America. Somewhere there may still be descendants of Elizabeth Thornton and James Bennet who do not know the extraordinary courage and hope that shaped their ancestors' lives. The final known trace of Elizabeth appears in 1869, 30 years after her scandal shocked Savannah. A notice in a Montreal newspaper announced the death of Mrs. Jane Bennet, formerly of the United States, aged 72. The short obituary said she was survived by her beloved granddaughter and remembered for her quiet strength, her love of poetry, and her belief that all souls are equal before God. She was buried in a small cemetery in St. Henry, in a grave she had purchased years earlier. Beside it was another grave, unmarked except for the years 1822-1849, the likely span of James Bennet's life. In 1963, when Dr. Elenina Hammond traveled to Montreal following Wilberforce's notes, she reportedly visited that cemetery. Whatever she discovered vanished along with her research material during her mysterious 3-day absence. By 1970, the cemetery was relocated for city development, and the graves were moved without individual markers, erasing the final physical piece of their story. All that remains now are fragments scattered in archives across Georgia, New York, Pennsylvania, and Quebec. Spoken testimonies long after the events, objects found under floors or behind walls, lines in diaries and letters never meant for the public. From these small pieces, we can trace the outline of something extraordinary, a quiet act of defiance against the boundaries of race and status. What stays unclear is not what Elizabeth and James did, but who they truly were to each other. When did teacher and student become equals? When did respect turn into something deeper? What promises were whispered in secret rooms? What gave them the strength to imagine a life everyone around them said was impossible? These unanswered questions fill the spaces between the remaining records. They echo through Savannah's history, unsettling its polished image of the Old South. The story of Elizabeth Thornton and James Bennett offers no simple ending, no easy lesson. It reminds us of the many untold stories hidden beneath official accounts, the quiet rebellions, the secret understandings, the human hearts that refuse to fit the lines drawn for them. As one Harvard researcher later wrote, "What makes the Thornton affair so haunting is not that it happened, but that it forces us to wonder how many others did too." If a woman of Elizabeth's status could risk everything for such a bond, how many others felt the same but lacked her courage or means? The real history of human connection across the divides of class and color in America remains mostly unwritten, existing only in fragments, whispers, and silence. In 1969, the same year Dr. Hammond's sealed envelope was opened, an elderly woman visited the Georgia Historical Society asking for any materials related to the Thornton plantation. The archivist described her as well-dressed, in her 70s, with light brown skin and gray eyes. She spent hours reading the files, making notes. When asked about her interest, she said she was tracing her family roots. As she left, she paused at the display case holding the cameo brooch and pressed flower found in 1957. She stood quietly for a long moment, then smiled, not sadly, but as if remembering something from long ago. She touched the glass lightly and said, "Some stories are better left untold, but that does not make them any less true." She never returned, and her name was never recorded. Like much of this story, she remains another fragment, another echo from a past that refuses to fade. In the end, this may be what makes the Thornton Bennett story so powerful: the endurance of human connection, the refusal of love in any form to obey the rules society builds around it. In a world that claimed certain feelings were impossible, Elizabeth and James carved out a small space for themselves, first in secret, then in exile, and finally in memory. Even now, the pieces they left behind can still move us. In Savannah, on certain April nights when the air is heavy with jasmine and memory, guides still point to Reynolds Square and speak softly of the widow who defied her world. Some say they see lights in old windows, hear faint poetry recited, feel a sudden chill in the warm air. These are just stories told to give visitors a sense of mystery, but beneath them lies a deeper truth. The past is never as simple as we want it to be. Human hearts have always resisted being contained, and perhaps somewhere the descendants of Elizabeth Thornton and James Bennett still walk among us, carrying a quiet legacy of courage and defiance that even time could not erase.